Yeah, Aaron David Miller, early in the morning. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to talk to you obviously about the Middle East. It's so great to see you, my friend. We've talked so much over the years and become friends, and I have so much respect for you and your thoughts on everything. Before we get to the obvious Middle East, Iran, Israel that I want to talk to you about, how do you articulate the moment that we are in?
I mean, I think we've been through crises before in this country. The greatest, obviously, Civil War. I tried to explain to a millennial um, a few weeks ago why 1968 was a terrible year for America. In fact, worse than this one, worse than any year in any of the Trump administrations. Thousands of Americans were dying, thousands in Vietnam. You had the assassination of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy. You had urban riots with a severity that goes beyond anything we've seen here. You had Chicago in 1968, the Republican National Convention. But we've never been here before. We've never had a president who sought to aggrandize presidential power. We've never had a president who has no capacity to turn the M in me upside down so it becomes a W in we. Everything that he does is subordinated either to his grievances, his financial interests, his political interests, and it's being done with a cruelty and an unkindness that is really quite remarkable. I mean, I'm a product of the system, right? Full confession. I had 27 years working for Republican and Democratic secretaries of state. My friends who are still at think tanks that are literally the Wilson Center, where I worked for 10 years, has been completely zeroed out. U.S. Institute for Peace has been dismantled, trying to make a recovery. VOA, which is not American propaganda, but it's become a source and a beacon to so many oppressed and repressed peoples abroad, is under unbelievable assault. USAID, providing extraordinary support. I mean, PEPFAR alone, George W. Bush's, I think, greatest contribution. You could see the deaths of 500,000 people as a consequence of dried up funding. And I just, for people of a certain age, that would be me. I'm not sure it's coming back the way it used to be. Now, are reforms necessary? Absolutely. But not the way this is being done. And it's being done not just to government, the universities, science, law firms. I mean, it's an effort literally to destroy. And even though there are people in the Trump administration that have ideological views of the America they want, I mean, the wreckage without an alternative creation that would benefit the vast majority of people in this country, it's really bad, Pete, really bad.
Yeah, I really appreciate your perspective on all of it. Just say one more word about USAID or the importance of soft power, because everything in America now led by Trump has to be very, quote, masculine or fake masculine or tough or strong or military parades. But as you know, as well as anybody in this country, the Department of State, the U.S. Institute of Peace, USAID, and what is called soft power has helped this country accomplish more than the vast majority of Americans know for about a penny of your taxes.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a small percentage of the foreign assistance budget, and it does such good. And USAID needed to be reformed. There's no question about it. But they provided invaluable, as you put it, soft power. I mean, we haven't always lived up to our values. Let's be very clear. I mean, human rights and democracy promotion has, in my judgment, I worked for Republicans and Democrats and voted for them as well, has never been the centerpiece. But our values, the way we want to be and hope to be, the way we project ourselves in the world, hearts and minds, minds and hearts, it's a critical part. And, it's not enough, frankly, to be feared. You want a country that is respected and admired as well. And I mean, our adversaries are rubbing their hands together. They cannot believe, the Russians and the Chinese, even with Trump's tariffs, cannot believe how seamlessly this man bonds with authoritarian powers and autocrats. And our allies are in a state of incredible disarray and confusion. about whether or not Joe Biden was simply a temporary return to multilateral diplomacy, respect for allies, try to find a balance of interest that respects ours and theirs rather than to turn life into a zero-sum game in Mr. Trump's world where I want to win. Winning is everything.
Right.
So, no, I mean, and again, I worry that this is, even should the Democrats take the House in 2026, even if they return to power, to office in 2028, stuff is being broken here. That's going to be very, very difficult. I want to just make one additional point.
Sure.
Quickly for a young audience. I mean, admittedly, I'm old, right? I just turned 76. The reality is America is not a big ATM machine where you only get to make withdrawals. You got to make deposits. And the deposits are the responsibilities and obligations of citizenship, not just voting, but a kind of identification with America as an enterprise, as a country worth preserving with some affection and respect. It's okay to be a citizen of the world. It's okay to fight for the rights of an individual community. That's inclusion. That needs to happen. But I think if we're going to turn this around, particularly for the future generation, we need young Americans who have a concept of a country they want to live in and identify that way and work toward that end. Sorry for the lecture, but
I could listen to you talk. I always want to hear your thoughts on all of it, of it. And by the way, happy Father's Day. So I want to hear your thoughts on
back at you.
Just before we get to what's going on right now in the Middle East with Israel and Iran, I just wanted to go back because context is so important in all of these situations. Certainly this one. Back in 2015, I was talking to you on my show about the very important, long-thought, negotiated Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, an international agreement that was reached between Iran and several world powers. It was hard fought. John Kerry, I remember talking a lot about the work that he and so many others did and how close it got to falling apart. The primary goal, of course, to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. The easiest way to summarize it that most people across the board say is, well, it wasn't perfect. We didn't get everything we wanted out of it, but it would have prevented them from getting a weapon at least for a while longer. And that is preferred than war. Well, just take me back to 2015 and that agreement that President Trump in his first term broke immediately as everything.
2018, he pulled out. For reasons that have more to do with domestic politics and his own personal preferences and grievances. And look, it was, I described the JCPOA, first of all, getting anything done, reaching any agreement, if you're a US mediator, is really, really hard. This agreement was functional. It constrained Iran's ability to enrich uranium. It constrained the time between where we are now and its breakout, that is to say, acquiring enough fissile material to make a nuclear weapon, and then going through the elaborate process of absolutely weaponizing. It imposed pretty good monitoring restrictions through the IAEA, but it was flawed as well. And the problem, there are no good deals with Iran. There are no good deals with the Islamic Republic. And that I think is the real problem here. The best you can do, the Israelis are testing that assumption. The best you could do, I've argued, in as long as you have an Islamic regime, this one that has that is acquisitive, it wants to acquire, or at least be in a position, I would put it, as being one screwdriver's turn away from a nuclear weapon. So 6 months, a year and a half, until what we've seen today, it seemed to me that was a sensible, rational strategy, because it occurred to me that even if you used military force, as the Israelis are doing now, to cripple, wound, or even destroy Iran's nuclear program, and even if the United States became involved, with the weapons, B-2 Spirit bombers, which carry these massive ordnance penetrators, the bunker busters.
Yeah.
It would only delay the inevitable surge, particularly after a strike, and it might even incentivize the Iranians to actually produce a weapon. And I think we're going to watch to see whether that proposition is going to be tested. I don't think the Israelis can destroy the nuclear program. Once scientific knowledge enters the head of a scientific community, how do you extract it?
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think there are undeclared Iranian nuclear sites that we don't know about, that the Israelis don't know about. That's part of the problem. Plus, the Israelis don't have the necessary tools to do what we could do. And even if, I'm not predicting this, I think Trump does not want to get into this, but even if the US entered the war, I don't think even we could fundamentally eradicate the program. The Israelis may have other things in mind, though, Pete. I mean, regime change, what does that actually mean? And how do they think these actions in coming days and weeks? And by the way, the trajectory of this thing is not going to be measured in days. We're talking here weeks. You and I are going to be having this conversation, I suspect, 2 weeks from now. We can talk about why that is. But I think that even if the United States got into this, I'm not predicting it, but even if they did, it would be a severe blow to the program. But unless circumstances were created so that the government of Iran, which abuses, represses, prosecutes, imprisons, tortures its own citizens, were somehow replaced, and only the Iranian people would have the final say in how that is going to be done, you are not going to fix the problem. I'm not recommending regime change. I wish there were another regime in Iran. I don't think we have the capacity to do that. And I don't see how you get from where we are now to that point, if that's what the Israelis hope to set the stage for.
My understanding, having watched what's happened in Iran over the past 10, 15 years especially, is that regime change probably has to come from within. And even that has been, so far, it has failed. We've seen these revolutions over the years, in 2009, a couple of years ago. But Israel striking Iran, like every other country, creates a kind of nationalism, doesn't it? Doesn't it create support for the regime potentially? I mean, I don't understand how a military strike from Israel or any other foreign country would create regime change here or ever in any other country. It doesn't seem to work that way in modern.
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, the Arab Spring was, in some respects, an example of a situation where you had, tethered to social media and corruption, dysfunction of the regime, you had popular protests, which essentially faced Tunisia and Egypt. Those are the two classic examples. And even when those regimes changed, you either got more repression, which you have today in Egypt, Abdel Fattah Sisi, or a greater centralization of power in Tunisia and in countries like Syria and Yemen, Libya and Yemen for sure. You got dysfunction and even state failure. So no, this is a complicated process. I think the Israelis somehow look at what's happened in Syria, where you had a formerly affiliated militia group, Hayat Tahrir Sham, HTS, exploit a incredibly weak Assad regime, and in a matter of weeks, produced regime change. Those circumstances are not replicable, in my judgment, in Iran. You don't. Where is the counterforce? Where is the HTS, the organized, former governing party of a northeastern province, Idlib in Syria, coherent, cohesive, backed by Turkey, on the ground? Where is that? There's no analogy.
There's no analogy, and Iran seems to be, I had no idea, like you do, obviously, but such a different country today in 2025 than, say, Syria has been, or any of these other countries that you mentioned had the revolution from within,
Right.
what then can be Israel's ground game? It's an interesting timing, of course, given the last year or so and what's happened in Syria, who was friendly, obviously, with Iran, what's happened with Hezbollah, who was a proxy, what's happened, obviously, with Hamas, and how the Arab world has turned and been open to some things they haven't been in the world. I mean, the timing seems to be everything. Some people are saying this is domestic politics, as craven as it could be, that Netanyahu's power was in, being questioned. There was a vote of confidence happening. So, hey, strike Iran now. And the other part of the timing that's pretty strange is that the Trump administration was sending negotiators to meet with Iranian negotiators on a deal. And now there's all this conversation about, four-way, three-way chess or some strategy, which every time I feel like is wrong if you're talking about the Trump administration. So what about the timing, given everything I just said?
I think the timing was a function of several factors. And I think this was not the Israeli government didn't get up, last week and decide that this would be
planned. The reporting is they've been planning the strike for months.
Right. So let's assume in view of what the Israelis have possessed now, after being stunned and shocked in the wake of October 7th, where they lost their capacity to respond effectively, and their whole notion of deterrence was shattered on that day. Particularly over the last 6 to 8 months in the fall, they mounted these campaigns. First, Hezbollah, then you had the fall of the Assad regime. The Israelis have escalation dominance. That's a fancy word to describe the following. They control the pace, the intensity, the focus of their military activities against their adversaries. In this case, Hamas, the Houthis, and Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. The Houthis, because of their distance and their capacity, presents a slightly different problem for the Israelis. But the Israelis can escalate in ways that none of their adversaries can. And you watch that play out. So as one retired Israeli, I did a couple CNN interviews last night, and I said, as one retired Israeli general said to me, we're playing soccer with the Israelis. With the Iranians, the difference is they don't have a goalie. And that is a mental image of exactly what's taking place over the skies of Tehran. So, buoyed by their success against Hezbollah and even their attacks on Iran last April and October, that was factor number one. The so-called ring of fire, right? Iran's proxies had kind of burned out. Factor number two is the Trump administration. I think Netanyahu concluded rightly that he would never have a better chance to do this than now. Because when some adventurous journalist reconstructs the TikTok of what happened between that first phone call last Monday, when Trump said to Netanyahu, please, no, we don't need this. And Thursday, when Trump became an integral part of the Israeli ruse to fool the Iranians, Trump knew on Thursday, Pete, last Thursday, that Israel was going to strike overnight. And yet the administration maintained the fiction that on Sunday, Stephen Witkoff was going to go to Oman to negotiate with the Iranians. This was part of the ruse, and the Americans played a role in it. There's no doubt about it. And Trump, he loves to win. He loves success. I'm sure he's been amazed at the operational competency of the Israelis, particularly the intelligence business of launching drones internally, right? So he's riding the tiger now. Sometimes you have to fight it out, he says. But there's going to be peace. We're talking to everybody. The reality is there's not going to be peace, because the dynamic of the three major players, Israel, Iran, and the U.S., at this stage is keep on keeping on.
Right. What about the strikes themselves? How effective were they? We're reading about the target list and how effective the Israelis have been very effective in all kinds of different military operations throughout their history. We've seen the movies made about them, the documentaries. Much of it is at this point public. We know that they would put sticky bombs on motorcycles and kill important people, scientists. Trump obviously assassinated Soleimani when he would during Trump 1. But this military operation seems far more elaborate, and that they did all of those things and much more. And my understanding is the only weapon they don't have is this special kind of missile or bomb that can penetrate the earth far enough to destroy their capabilities, nuclear capabilities. And as you just mentioned, we don't even necessarily know where they all are. And I did see Top Gun Maverick, so I know it's possible.
Right. Let's put it this way. The Iranian program is decentralized, it's redundant, it's deeply buried. And to quote Don Rumsfeld, there are also unknown unknowns. We don't know, the IAEA doesn't know, the Israelis don't know where all of these undeclared nuclear facilities are. The so-called BDA that the US military does, the battle damage assessment, will take weeks, if not months, to determine the degree of damage. It appears as if there were 3 or 4 sets of possible targets. One was the decapitation strategy. And that is why Trump's willingness to play along with this ruse on Thursday, Friday was so important, because the Iranians were convinced Israel would not strike until the 6th round of those negotiations between Witkoff and the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi had taken place in Oman. They struck 3 days before. They hit head of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, killed him. They hit the chief of staff of the general staff of the Iranian military, killed him. Several other high-ranking IRGC commanders are dead. They went after key nuclear physicists, scientists, and engineers. So there was a decapitation strategy. That was the quote-unquote shock and awe.
Right.
Something I should have understood but didn't focus on. Second was the making sure Iran played soccer with the Israelis without a goalie. They went after UAV, drone sites, ballistic missile production facilities, launchers. How many ballistic missiles Iran has left? It was estimated that they had, 2,000 to 2,500 longer range, which take 13 minutes, maybe less, when launched to reach Israel. And then the declared main event of the operation was attacks on nuclear sites. We know that they've struck and done considerable damage at Natanz, which is the main enrichment facility. They seem to have caved the roofs based on the overhead. How much damage that has done to these advanced centrifuges, unclear. Most of the stockpile of highly enriched uranium that the Iranians have is in Isfahan. My understanding is there have been strikes in Isfahan. Whether they've damaged that stockpile or not, unclear. Fordo, which is the half-mile below ground, in a mountain underground complex, where much of the enrichment and the centrifuges are, that remains largely inaccessible by air. There's been all this speculation about special ops, dropping teams of Israelis on the ground. Don't know. But I think it's fair to say they've done significant damage in 4 days. And by the way, they have no intention of letting up. And they've gone off this South Pars gas field. They blew up the main gas depot in Iran. You got long lines of Iranians waiting at gas stations. You know the price of oil's gone up to $75, right? Gas prices are going to go up the longer this continues. All and said and done, that I think part of their dilemma is that regardless of what they set out to do, even if they said, we know we can't destroy the program, the question is, how do they now rationalize stopping?
Right.
When do the Israelis decide,
right,
if they can't change the regime, they don't have the military equipment to do the big damage? When do they then decide that there's been enough to stop. And right now, I don't think there's an answer to that question.
Last question for you. So glad I get to talk to you today. Our friend Julia Yaffe posted on social media. So for those of you keeping track, Trump says he'll end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. Putin told him to pound sand. Now the war is worse than ever. Trump said he'll solve the Gaza war. That war now worse than ever. Trump tells Bibi not to strike Iran to give him space to negotiate. Bibi strikes Iran 2 days before talks. Does it seem like world leaders respect Donald Trump? He's meeting the G7 this week, the Canadian leader, the Mexican leader, and Volodymyr Zelensky apparently is going to meet him there in Alberta as well. Does it seem like world leaders respect Trump? Do you think that Julia's?
I mean, yeah, our adversaries are playing him, and our allies, frankly, and you saw the parade in the wake of the tariffs.
Yeah,
are whether they respect him or not, and I think the answer is no. They don't know what to make of him, and they're very worried. All of them, from Canada to Mexico, they're worried about this man. And I think we're not admired, we're not respected. There may be a good deal of fear on the part of our allies, certainly not on the part of Xi Jinping or Putin, who I think believe, even Xi Jinping believes somehow, that this whole Trump thing will alienate American allies. It will undermine American credibility, and in the long term, with respect to Taiwan and Xi's other objectives, it may actually advance Chinese interests, given the America First notion that Trump is peddling. So no, I think the situation, Pete, is going to get worse before it gets worse. And Julia Yaffe is right, the 3 U.S. mediated negotiations are cratered. Part of it is because these are tough lifts, but part of it is because Donald Trump has no strategy.
right.
He doesn't know how to use American leverage, and he doesn't know how to apply vinegar as well as honey
I would
to
say
these negotiations.
I would say it even more basic in that even in America's greatest negotiators in negotiations, which you yourself have been involved, you've seen the best of the best, even with the best negotiators in the best circumstances, and they're never great. It's very hard to get a deal, an international deal. But in tougher circumstances, when you send negotiators whose last job was running a Honda dealership, I mean, the point is, he doesn't even have good people negotiate. They don't have experience. But even if they were the best negotiators, on their way to the negotiation, Trump will post something that ruins the deal. Like, it's, even if they were good negotiators, you got the guy in charge who, as you said, is so uncertain he could destroy the deal, and they aren't good negotiators. So that makes the worse that much worse. That's my thought.
Well, Pete, our conversation, me, listen to myself, you talking, I've succeeded in depressing myself, and it's only 8:15. I mean, I don't know.
That's the norm. That's the baseline that we wake up with.
Too early to start drinking, and it's raining outside. I'm not gonna walk around. So we'll do this. We should definitely. I miss you. I miss our conversations. Your audience is lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Really lucky.
We'll do it. We should just do a talk on life at some point soon, and everything else. I'd love to just talk to you, get outside the normal conversations that we have, and talk about the things that you've seen, experienced, and learned. I think that would be really
well. One of these days on the way to Maine, we'll stop in Nyack, and
I would love that.
It would be great.
Thank you, my friend. You're an American treasure. Thank you for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pete. Take care.
There he goes. Aaron David Miller, everybody. One of the best. So great. All right.